would like, since you know your mind should be focused on the project at this point, to use these lectures really, half of them at least, as a sort of public office hours in which you come with your interesting questions and we try to work on them, or maybe you demo the piece of app you have, and we try to all give advice and try to work on your problems. So essentially, this is lectures for you to help you with your project. Okay. So what I want to do today is I want to give you some brief summary of lessons I learned while developing for Android, just for discussion on how to develop apps. And then I want to show you something with a phone gap that is now called Apache Cordova. This was, in my introduction to the class, one of the ways to actually avoid using Android for development, right? So you can write web pages that get executed on the phone, but they have full access to many of the phone APIs. So that's quite interesting. And I want to show you how to do it. Unfortunately, I planned to do it more extensively, but one of the things that is very annoying, I think, in computer science is that your target moves. So I can get Apache Cordova working as of some editions ago, and today I spent 3 hours getting the latest version to work, and it doesn't work for some very obvious reason, perhaps, but I couldn't find it. So my demo will be on a slightly older version of Apache Cordova, and maybe next time I will continue on the new version if I figure out what's wrong, or maybe I can show you what's wrong and you help me for once. But so this is the program, okay? Some lessons learned and to see how Apache Cordova works. Also, for the final project, I would like you to present the project. There will be 2 opportunities. One is at the date of the final exam, and the other one is at the date of the final class, so that you're done with it earlier in case you have other classes, okay? I'm not sure I'm able to accommodate everybody depending on how many groups we have in these 2 dates. If you strongly prefer another date, let me know. I mean, not after the final exam, because I actually have a very tight time to turn in all the grades afterwards. But if you want to present before the date of the final exam, you know, let me know when your wish would be, and maybe I can accommodate it, right? So we have fewer people on the same days. So let me just give you this quick presentation, and then, you know, the second half of this lecture will be really to see if you have questions or anything you would like me to revise or do or answer. Hold on, here is where I want to go. Okay, so this I wrote it last year. Now I've updated it in part with other things I thought in the meantime. But if you have other questions, it's fine. So this is lessons I learned from developing real apps. So of course, you know, you start, as you know, by deciding how many activities to have. And so you break the code in activities and you draw some simple navigation. I usually do that just on paper. You know, I decide how to do it on paper, and then I start coding. This I think is pretty obvious to you, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. A question that always nags me is the following: do you actually develop your own UI elements, or do you use the standard ones that come with Android? What I mean is the following. Quite often you want to, let's take an incredibly simple example. You want to display a notification like, I'm sorry, but your photos all disappeared. No? So you have 2 choices. I mean, you have many more choices than 2, but you have at least 2 choices. One is that you do a toast. Okay? So a toast is one of these messages that flash on the screen and then disappear. Another one might be that you do a dialogue and you say, your photos have all disappeared. Okay, no? So dismiss. And so the person has to dismiss. So that's a dialogue. We have a toast and a dialogue. But the other choice is really to develop your own UI. So you could do something like this. You could, sorry, I have to dive under here. Yeah, they hit these things. So you know, on the phone screen, you could you know, develop, for example, an unhappy face, you know, that is a little bit funny, and maybe here you would have your main message, and maybe, you know, here you would have the button to dismiss it, and you know, you could have graphics and do whatever you want, okay? And so essentially, how would you write something like this? You would write your own activity, and you would either style it as an activity, meaning that it would completely erase what was below, or you can style an activity as a dialogue, which makes the underlying screen semi-transparent. So this is in the foreground, but you can still see a little bit of what was behind. Okay, and so you do entirely your own UI. Another thing that I was wondering recently, or you know, that I did recently was, you know, I needed people to log into some place, and so there was the choice between a simple dialogue that said, you know, please log in into your app, okay, cancel, done with a dialogue, or else you could say something and then please no, and you could say, for example, with a nice button that said sign in. No? And then you could write some other text, and you could have another beautiful button. So you could do it either with a dialogue or essentially the same thing with your own UI. What are the pros and cons? Okay, let me give you another example. The time and date picker. There is a default one on Android, which you know, you can either pick a date or you can pick a time. There is no joined date time picker, at least as last I checked. Okay. And it works in a certain way. I don't know, because I always avoid using it, but I think it has this sort of spinner for the minutes, etc. Or else you can do your own UI. For example, even the alarm clock application in the newest Androids has this nice UI in which you know, you have this clock face, and you have 12, 6, 3, 9, you know, and you can you have these sort of hands that act as indicators of the number you choose, and you sort of move them to the hour you want, right? So you can build your own UI. And this, so what's the advantage? This summarizes it a bit. So if you use the standard UI, it's standard across applications. Everybody knows what a dialogue is and how to dismiss it, right? So it's more standard. Initially, it's less code. And it's great when it works. What I found somewhat maddening, actually, when developing apps, is that these things are going to look all different on all possible Androids, and it's really difficult to ensure that you have an app with a unified look. Okay, because on some version it's going to be black with a white text, on another version is going to be white with black text, on another old version is going to look like that. You know, it's all. It's difficult to ensure a uniformity because you're reliant on the Android framework, and the Android framework changed. And the other thing that I really didn't like is that many of these default UI choices are not that great, in my opinion. You know, these notification toasts are developed for people who have 20/20 vision. For me, they are incredibly small. I hardly can read it on the screen. Okay, I mean, this depends on me, of course. But since I need reading glasses, and you know, half of the population is aging, so half of the population is roughly like me. You know, now my reading distance is like this. If you make the default Android toast when I don't wear glasses, so if you make the default Android toast with its very small font, I simply don't read it. Okay, I see that there's something that flashes. Oh well, you know, let me find my glasses, and then I can read this a second time if I can reproduce it. So other UI choices are suboptimal in other ways. You know, my thumb is at the bottom of a phone when I hold it, right? So I can easily click things in this region, but not on the top of the phone. So all these dialogues that have the done on top, you know, I really don't like them because I need to use my other hand, which, you know, I might have been, and then I need to sort of poke there, you know, without. So there are many of these UI choices that I kind of dislike, and so, you know, the temptation to roll my own UI is always very large. Okay, and if you look at many successful apps, actually they're doing just that. Okay, for example, one of my favorite apps. I mean, I use it all the time when I drive. Is Waze. Okay, and if you look at how Waze works, I think you all know Waze. Hey, does wake up? No, yes, these. So this is my phone. The people offline can just look at Waze, I guess. Wake up. I don't know why it's not sending. Sorry, something happened here. Sorry, just 1 second. Well, okay, now I managed to show it. Maybe today is the day in which nothing that I really touch works. But it's true, actually. It's the general projector that is refusing to work. Ah, okay, so now it's showing that. Did it work? Okay, so there was. So, for example, you know, they could have done these with the dialogues, I suppose. So when you press here, you know, you have some choices. Okay, but they did have custom UI, and they did it quite well, because if you hold the phone in your hand, you can press these easily. Okay, or you can also easily, and they put it in the easiest corner to press these, so that you can notify of things on the road, right? So it's quite well done, and this is not following, of course, the Android design guidelines. I mean, what's not so well done, of course, are other things, like if you want to report a hazard, you know, it asks you an incredible number of questions before you can actually finish it. So this is more similar to a standard Android dialogue. Okay, but so everything there is quite well customized, essentially, and my preference is actually for the for developing apps that have this should return to the computer. Let's see. Okay, my preference is for apps that develop their own UI. Okay, I think it looks more refined. It just looks better. So the drawback is a drawback at the level of the Android platform. That is, if every app develops their own UI, Android as a whole is less usable. Okay. Because every app is going to be different, and you cannot know that, for example, that the menu is always accessible in the same position and that these things are always available in the same way. So Android as a whole becomes less usable, but your app becomes more usable, essentially. It's one of these problems of game theory, right, in which the common good and the personal good do not coincide. Your private good is to make your app as good as possible. And if everybody does that, what's happening is that Android is not being as good as possible, because everybody is overriding the Android default choices with their own. The situation under the iPhone is a bit better, but it's also probably fair to say that that for the iPhone, they're putting more thought and more uniformity in the UI choices. In my opinion, at least, it's far more usable, the default style. In some of the previous years, I would show the Android style guide, UI design guide, side by side with the iOS one, and it was incredible for me, at least. You know, most of the elements. I mean, I love coding for Android, but almost everything that I loved in the UI wise was the iPhone schemes. I don't know how, but you know, just much better what I would expect in a UI. Okay. So the drawback of doing your custom UI is also that you need a graphic artist, and it's a very difficult job. Even fairly simple things that you know you don't give it a moment of thought when you use somebody else's become very difficult to make your own. Even you know buttons that really have a 3D feel and have the right shading and have the right appearance, you know, they're hours of work by experts, and I don't know how to do that. And so either you learn or you work with somebody who can do that. It's a difficult skill. So another thing is this. So when you do a UI, there is this big mix that is instead in the design space that I find it incredibly difficult to navigate always. That is, you are trying to make your app as simple as possible, and so you know to remove away everything that you can possibly remove. But you also need to make it, you know, so that it's a good app, and you also try to make everything in a way that is discoverable, so that people know where to click in order to get something done. And I find that is incredibly difficult for some of the apps that I've made. Okay, I made a sort of a viewer app for webcams essentially, and there are some things that we needed to do. For example, I needed to give you the choice of which webcam you wanted to look at, which time, which day of the week, which fine. So that was some set of choices. But then you needed to be able to do things like, you know, selecting some images that you thought were interesting to share them. And so, you know, pretty soon when you develop such an app, you have too many things that you want to make available for them to fit nicely on the screen. How exactly do you organize them so that it's obvious that, you know, you have that capability, but people will go looking under a certain button in order to find it, right? How do you organize that? You know, if you want to share images, it's very easy to click on an image and share it, but what if you want to share 10 of them, you know? And how to make it obvious, you know, how to select and share versus how to just select one and share that one. I mean, many things become quite complicated. Not so much, you know, implementing every individual thing is complicated, but what I find very difficult is this balance that is really in the UI design of making sure that everything is accessible, but the UI is simple and you can find everything where you think it is. So that's what, in my opinion, one of the main challenges. Coding, I already told you to use Git, so this is I can go fast. The other thing that really helps for me is always to move from one version that works to another version that works. And never take big jumps in which you have non-working code. Okay. And the other thing that I do is that when I produce a lot of experimental APKs, you know, I export it every now and then, and I make it available to, you know, friends, myself, testers, and I typically name each APK with a commit number in Git, so that when people complain to me, I can know which code they're actually running, because pretty soon you are going to have various versions out, and you don't necessarily know which one is which. In fact, if you can afford it, a fantastic trick is to also, you know, that log tag string that you have in logs. Maybe you want to inject the version code there, if you really make a release a week or so, you know, so that when people give you the dump of their crashes, I mean, the people will be your collaborators, because in this case, if they give you the dump, you know, they need to be able to have the tools to extract it installed on their phone. But then, you know, you can really see which version is that crashed. It's an immense help, because sometimes, you know, you have multiple versions that people are trying, and it's difficult to keep track. So another thing is that I don't see done all the time, but it helps me incredibly, is this. I code very defensively. So I always assume that other things can go wrong at any time, and I always try to make sure that my code tries to fix as many errors as possible. Meaning that, imagine that you have this get soup method that builds a soup and returns it, and imagine that there is no soup. Would you return a null pointer? Some people say, yes, that's a good idea, because so you signal your client that there is no soup, and the soup needs to be built by calling a soup builder method, okay? My approach here is typically different. I try to do the maximum amount of effort I can in order not to return the null pointers, but rather, build in the best possible way what I need to build in order to return a non-null object that behaves in a half reasonable way. Okay? And if I want you to discover that there is no soup, that it needs to be created upon the next call, I would give you another method that says, is there any soup? But so that if by mistake, you forget checking, your app doesn't crash. Maybe you get a suboptimal behavior, maybe something is not perfect, but it doesn't crash, okay? So a typical thing that is done in a stupid way, in my opinion, is the get current location method of Android. Somebody thought, okay, if there is no current location known, let's just return a null pointer so that you know that there is no location known, okay? And this is a very annoying cause of crashes, because the problem is that if you test on a real phone, there is almost always a current location. So you never find that you have a problem. Then, on somebody's phone, just after they rebooted it, your app launches and it crashes because the get current location returns a null pointer. It's just silly, especially since the location contains the radius of uncertainty. You could very well put everybody at the North Pole with a radius of uncertainty of, 20,000 kilometers, which is, the radius, the half diameter of Earth, and you would be done with it. No? They're somewhere on planet Earth, and then as the measurements come in, you shrink it. Or you decide that everybody's in, I don't know, in Mountain View at the Google headquarters with, half 20,000 kilometers uncertainty. I don't know how many miles, but okay. So essentially, my idea is always try to be as helpful as possible. Try to always remedy as much as you can of the situation in the code you are writing, so that the people calling you have the fewest possible reasons to fail. Okay, because you never know when your code is going to be calling or what assumptions might change around it. Okay. The other half of it is that in Android, pretty much everything can disappear from under your feet. It's incredible, how many things that you count on may actually not be there when you don't expect it. I think I was talking to you about this phenomenon a couple of classes ago, right? The problem is that sometimes the phone goes to sleep in a certain state, or the user changes activity when you're in a certain state, and basically all of your app is going to be removed from the stack, okay? So it still remembers that you were in that activity, but all the memory has been deallocated. And then, that particular activity is recreated. And at that point, many of the things that you thought you had may not be there anymore, okay? Information that you might have saved, from HTTP calls, etc. So even, for example, all the layout objects, I've had the problem that that when you have a view, you have to do find view by ID of the view, and then you get to the view, and then you cast it to the particular view type you want, and then you say you do whatever you want to that view, okay? In some cases, I was, I said, but that's silly to always do it in place. Why don't I do it in the onCreate method when I set the view layout? Then I do all the find view by ID I want. I store them into integers, and then I use them, in integers, sorry, in view objects, right? And then I use them throughout my code whenever I need them, but I don't do any more of this find. This was a really bad idea, because sometimes the view disappears, okay, because you move to some other place. So let me give you an example of what happens. So you are in an activity, okay? You do that find view by ID, and that gives you a view object. The ID is always the same, is ID 17, but the view object is a particular view object. Then you launch another, you click on a button, you move to another activity, and maybe the memory space of your view is going to be recycled. So the view disappears. When the user presses the back button, the layout is recreated. So the screen is populated again, exactly as it was, right? But it's populated again. So now you have a new view object. The old button, you may have the same button on the screen, but now it corresponds to a different object than the one you had at the beginning. So in the onCreate method, you are essentially holding a reference to a view object that is not anymore the one on the screen. And so, you know, various things happen if you try to actually use it. I don't remember exactly, but it was crashing one way or the other. Okay, so I learned that you only get references to views when you actually need them. Okay, not at the beginning. I found it also very difficult to predict compared to other things the development time. Because I mean, I think now the situation is better in some ways. It's better because there was a very big divide between Android 2.3 and Android 4. If you now develop mostly for Android 4 and later, the development is more uniform, okay? I run into incredible trouble sometimes trying to straddle the two. I remember there was one day, I mean, 3 days in which I was trying to implement dialogues, and I was trying the new fragment approach, and it worked perfectly on newer phones. And then I was using the compatibility library for older phones. And the Android compatibility library worked fine for old phones, but then some parts of it collided with some other thing I was trying to do. I don't remember the detail, but essentially there was something that really was not working on some of the old phones due to the compatibility library, okay? So I spent essentially a couple of days trying to find patches to the compatibility library or other versions of the compatibility library that would fix it, etc., back and forth. And in the end, I scrapped everything and I used a deprecated approach, and that eventually worked. But you know, if you are writing in some other setting, like for the web, usually if you need to bring up a window that has a dialogue in it, you don't quite spend so much time in it. Okay, so I found it very difficult to predict. I mean, there are also, I found at least on these Android phones, many things that are really thought with the idea that the phone is a device that you hold in your hand, and is not a general purpose, you know, a more general computer. And so, since in some of the things that I like to do, you know, I like embedded systems, etc., I really try to use Android phones as more of an embedded platform. I'm finding incredible difficulties sometimes bending them to behave in the way I want. For example, it's sometimes really difficult to tell them, look, you know, I want to do this. I don't want you to interrupt with any notifications. I don't want you to do anything else. Just keep doing this in a stable way, please. No? And this that would be simple to achieve in other platforms. In Android is very difficult. Okay, many things like these are difficult. There are various versions of libraries. Okay, there's sometimes similar but not identical to the general versions. Okay, but actually libraries work fairly well. It's not my main complaint. Logcat is really great, but this I told you already. No, logging is fantastic. Some of the tricks that I don't want to write down, but are incredibly helpful if you really write an app, are the following. Sometimes there is a lot of confidential information in your logcat, no? Because you're logging things that describe the structure of your application, and not everybody should be able to see that. However, when I give you my app for testing, I would really like you to see that, no? And so, you know, how do you put the two together? So one way, there are various ways. One way that I've used is the following. You write, instead of log.i, you write something else like mylog class, no? And you say mylog.i. And then in the mylog class, you add a little bit of logic. One solution would be that you use the Google account on the phone to know what kind of logs you should be logging. Okay, for example, you can say, if you know, you can read the accounts, and if the accounts are in this set, if I can find at least one account that is in this set of accounts, then I actually do the log. No, and then you whitelist your friends or collaborators for the logging. Another trick that is simpler and sometimes incredibly effective is that you hide an Easter egg in your app. You know. Such that if you do something with the phone, I don't know, poke on some keys or do some other stuff with your phone, your fantasy should, you know, guide your imagination. But you essentially enable a mode in which you log and present, maybe even on the screen, a lot more information. Okay, so you can essentially give the same app to everybody. But even if you install it from the market, if if you somehow, you know, do that Easter egg thingy that you and your friends agreed on, then you can log much more, and you can, you know, get experimental behaviors on the phone. So these I found it incredibly useful. Okay, enabling, for example, let me give you another a simple example of this. It's not really on logging, but it's on development. Suppose you are developing an app that needs to access a server. Actually, this works really well with the App Engine deployments that I was advising you to use. So normally you have your app, and you have a server that may be called myapp.appspot.com. And even if you don't, well, actually now HTTPS certificates became free on Google, but even if you don't want to bother using one, you know, you can use HTTPS myapp.appspot.com. Okay, these will serve a version of code. In App Engine, you can keep multiple versions of code. Let me know if you want me today to talk more about server part. Okay, in the question part, I will let you ask if you want me to do that or not. But essentially, this will access your main version of code, and this is what the production app does for everybody else. The problem is that when you develop your new version, you know, your next release of the app, you need often to modify the server behavior. So how do you do that? Well, a simple way to do that is this. You push your new code to another version of the online App Engine. Okay, let's say you push it to version 2. And then you use to access that HTTPS, okay, 2.myapp, etc., etc. Okay, so this is the URL to access directly version 2 of code. Okay, so so you can share the same database, the same everything, but this runs a different version of the web code. If you're interested, I can tell you how to do that. Okay. But basically, here you can inject your new versions of the new behavior that you don't want yet to make available to everybody. And then you can use your Easter egg to trigger the fact that the URL you are using should be the other one. Okay? So that you can try your new API to the server rather than using the old one. I don't know what you want to use as Easter egg, but you know, your fantasy is there. You can, I don't know, when you press 5 times there and 2 times there, you know, you invent it. It's not important. It's just something that a normal user may not do often, you know, something like that. Okay, so this ability to essentially have an app switch from development behavior to regular behavior. So essentially it would start in regular behavior, but if you do this Easter eggy thing, then it goes to the development behavior. I found it very useful. Okay. Coding. Yeah. 3 ideas that are 2. I don't know where the third one went. But one idea that I already told you is this: now, code defensively, assume that other code might fail, and try to do always the best effort to repair the situation in every piece of code you are doing. I think this is controversial. There are many people that claim that this is maybe not the best. Some people claim that if you code too defensively, you can have underlying errors that go undiscovered for a long time. You know, because since you always try to make up for them, then you don't realize that there is something really going on, because it's never really exposed in an obvious way, right? So that's a drawback, but I still think it's worth being quite defensive. The other thing that I told you already many times in this class is there are some protocols that are incredibly difficult to do if you try to do them in a sophisticated way. And the approach that has always worked well for me is to keep things as simple as I can, and such that they can work in a best effort way. So never build protocols or way of working that, you know, for this to happen, there has to be these, and that all succeed, and they tell you know that each other that they have all succeeded. You know, try to eliminate these consensus steps as much as you can. Build protocols and actions, even for the user, in such a way that if they are repeated, and if the people and the code is persistent enough, eventually, you know, there's something good will happen. Okay, but don't be afraid to give up, and don't be afraid to just make failure obvious to the user, so that the user can retry at a later time. You know, these are mobile devices. Often you never know what's happening. You know, the user may be entering an elevator that has, you know, like a Faraday cage, doesn't let communication in and out, or you be in a highway tunnel or whatever, no? And so if you just communicate failure, you know, the ultimate retry engine is the user. So as long as it's obvious that something has worked or not, often people don't mind retrying. I mean, you know, you cannot forecast the whole set of failures that can go on a mobile phone, out of battery, out of everything, okay? Features, okay, build the simplest app first. Strategy is, can you leverage a web app or a web view? Okay, I already told you that one of the big advantages of, in my opinion, of a component of an app that is in part a web app or driven by a server is that you can update that portion at any time without being dependent on installed software, right? You get an update cycle that is much faster than if you need to depend on people updating their phone app. So there is a certain advantage to keeping your app simple and pushing a lot of it as much as you can, perhaps dynamically downloaded from the server, so that if you want to later tune it, you can do it from the server side. Okay. Then there is a lot of complication, I mean, a conceptual complication on account management, which is, I'm not sure I have a very good solution, frankly. The problem is this: do you need to let people create accounts, and if so, of which type? Okay, so in one approach that I think we took during the class, people don't create an account because you invent a random idea and that's good enough. Fine. That works, but has two drawbacks. One is that the mobile phone becomes the only access point to that information, meaning you cannot get to it from a browser, because you know, you have no way of proving to the system that you are the same person from the mobile and the web. And the other drawback is that, you know, if the phone dies in such a way that is lost, etc., the user, you know, cannot connect to the previous history of use of the app. So other ways are to implement some kind of Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc. login. This is probably the best, okay? Because at least you avoid users having to invent a new password. Of course, inventing a new password is the easiest for you. It's very easy to ask a user for username and password, okay? And once you have the password, it's very easy to use. No? On the web, well, the Web2Py enables you to, if you have a username and password pair, to check whether the user is authenticated, yes or no. And Web2Py lets you do that, but any other framework like Django or others let you do that as well, right? So it's very easy to validate the username and password from mobile, and of course it's easy also from the web, right? So it's a very easy way for you to do it. But people like me hate it, no? Because you know, given how frequently so first of all, you get the problem that you become a hacking target because people may want to hack you, not because you have something valuable. You probably don't. I mean, I don't know if you do, but the fact is that they think that if they, you know, they may think, you know, you don't seem to be a very serious company yet, so maybe I can hack into you. Once I hack into you, then I can get the username and password pairs, and then I can try them on other sites, and maybe they work because people share passwords between sites, and this is true and it works. Okay, so so the only defense is to do like I do, that I use a different password for every site, but it's incredibly difficult to enforce it, right? And if you do it, then you start hating coming up with a new password, and then you start to hate apps that ask you for a new password, Okay, and so you say, please log in, no, and oh, please, no, I want at least one number, one semicolon, and you say, no, get to hell, and you close it, no? That's the typical reaction. So there is a, I mean, but Snapchat does it. I think it asks me for a password, which I don't know if I remember. So the trick is that the real trick is this. You type a password that you forget. Okay, you don't write it anywhere. You don't even try to remember it. You just try, but you know, then next time you need it, which will be probably in 1 year, you would have anyway lost the place where you have written it, and so you might as well use your email address as a way to recover your password. You know, I think that's the way in practice people do it. So you know, you could do that as well, essentially. But then if you want to do that, actually in Android, there is a sort of niftier system, because I just want to mention it because it's a cute way. I have not seen it done, but I personally would consider it a very nice idea to do it. It's not super secure, but say, you know, what's your email address? Look at ucc.edu. Great. And at that point, the server sends you an email that contains welcome, Luca, yada yada. And then it contains something that is a special URL. Okay, so it contains, for example, an HTTP. Okay, and then there is your particular domain, like myapp dot I don't know what. Okay, myapp.com. Then, you know, in the manifest of Android, you have a section that is these intent receivers, right? You can register, you have this intent filter for launching your application. You can say that your application is able to respond to the view events for a URI that begins with http myapp.com, so that your app, if installed on the phone, can receive this URL. Okay, if you like, I can show you an example of this code. Okay, but basically, in the main activity of your app, or actually in any activity of your app, you can put an intent filter that is able to capture these browse events only for the URLs that are of a special shape. And you have this special shape. Let me do a more concrete example, because this is a very nice technique. This can be myapp.com welcome.html slash, actually without HTML, okay, slash 61239118, etc. Okay, so this is the URL. And so in the email message say, welcome, please click on this URL to get set up. Okay, now when your activity is launched in response to this browse event, I mean, of course, if the person chooses to view this with the browser, then you know you're lost. Well, you're not lost. You give him a page that says, no, you know, please click on this, go back to your email and click on this using the app, you know, and you give them a link to the App Store to download the app. Okay, you give them a link to download the app and you tell them to try again. But if they click on this link with your app, the activity will be launched, and they can retrieve the intent. There is a method that is called getIntent that you can use in onCreate. That gives you the intent that activated the activity. Okay, you say intent I is equal to getIntent, and then you can say, I forgot exactly how it is called, but I think it's called getURI, or there is a method to get the URI. Is it getURI? I forgot, but it's named something like that, okay? You can get the URI, you can parse it, and you can use these as a secret authentication token, okay? And if you think, well, email is not safe, yes, but everybody will be using it anyway to recover the password. So if email is not safe, you are toast in any case. You know, and I receive by email many more confidential things than I receive by these apps that I install to play with my phone. Okay? So for practical purposes, email is quite safe for these apps, or you have to assume it is. And so you can simply send people this registration token. The app can grab the registration token by passing the URI, can store it in the settings, and there you are. Okay, so at the same time, I have validated your email address, and I've set a token or an authentication code in your phone. Yeah, And if I want in the email, I can also send you a password that you can use with my site for accessing it through the web. So this is a simple way to avoid people creating an account in the usual way. The negative part is that it delays the gratification of using your app until people have received the email. And so that's the negative part, okay? That there is this various minute gratification delay that is really quite long for people, okay? I mean, if you download an app, you want to use it right away. So let's summarize. You can either create a secret in your app. You can also build mixes of these, okay? So now I'm sort of inventing, but for example, I can create a secret ID in your app. Then I can ask you for the email. I can send these two to the server, and I can send from the server. Well, okay, fine. You can invent your own authentication flags. Another thing that works quite well, if you decide to build on Google, is this: you can build a login page, okay, on the web. And you can have a web app that says, so when you need to log in into the app you built, you show a web app that logs in into your app on Google App Engine, on Google, okay? And you can build it in such a way that once you log in that particular page, okay, it sends you to another page that is called something like this, okay? And then your web view, you know that the web view is past every single URL that it needs to load, because there is this method that is called onload or on something like that. But the Android Java code supporting the web app can be shown as a sequence of URLs you are loading. And so when it sees URLs that have this special scheme, it can just set on your phone a login code that your web app decides to set. Okay, so this is also a very successful method for logging in. Does this make sense or not? Or would you like me to draw the diagram in more detail for this login method? Is anybody interested in seeing how it works? No. Okay. How are you logging in, by curiosity? So how are you building your login systems?
We're working on implementing the Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. That I have not used. Others? Are you doing any login? No. Are you talking to any other users than the user of the app itself or not? Okay. It's very strange, you know. I cannot imagine any app that is useful to me that really does not talk to others or that does not have an account for myself. So I'm almost puzzled by games. But even games, you know, I mean, after you play for a while, you want, for example, I don't know, my daughter was incredibly annoyed because one of these games she was playing, etc., did not back up her status online, and when she switched the phone, etc., she did not have an account and could not retrieve the virtual worlds she was building. So it's silly in the end, even games often. I mean, yes, if it's a simple game like, what was it, a flap bird? Bird flap? Flappy Bird. Yeah. Okay, so this is the end of this sort of presentation. Yeah, I'm really surprised that you can do so much without some idea of who the user is. But I don't know. Do you have any questions on this, or do you have any questions about your project that you would like me to address before we move to Apache Cordova? What would you like me to?
You said we shouldn't reference the object unless we really need it.
I'm saying that I sometimes had trouble if I got the reference to a viewer object in the onCreate method before I actually needed it, because sometimes the ID is permanent, but the view object is deallocated and then reallocated. Yes, so I had trouble.
You said sometimes we get lost of reference, but like with the activities, to actually update.
Yes, yes. And so I was very surprised that this could happen. But the layout, I think, is governed in a different way from the rest of the app. So I think that Android, to save space, can decide to deallocate part of the view layer, view tree, okay, even when the app is active. Okay, that's the trouble I was having. In particular, I don't know, and I could not find a definitive documentation on what is the lifespan of a view object. Okay, does it survive the on pause and on stop? Yes or no? Okay, and I had some other funny problems in other instances, and then I looked at a bunch of Android code, and it seems that everybody just gets a reference to the view object just when they need it, not in other moments. And so I adopted that style myself and stopped wandering a long time ago, yes. But I think you don't notice it if you have only one. Well, no, you may still notice. Cancel. Other questions? Yes?
Have you experienced getting if you have a web view and you want to do something other than just scrolling around the page, making a web page responding with jQuery or something to SOS or it's different interface and it's not you can't exactly treat it.
Yeah, let me give you a demo. But I have to caution that I built the Android side of this, but I didn't build the. Oops. Let me see if I can sign in quickly. If this works, I give you the demo. Otherwise, not. Yeah, I think I can. So, but this, I didn't build the UI for this. I mean, I built the Android app, but not the web code. But just to show you that it is possible, okay? So, so see, this scrolls, but it does not only scroll, but it's also dynamically loading images. When you touch an image, unfortunately here the screen is small, and so nothing much happens. But this has opened a bigger frame around it, and then you can close it, and then and this is all written by the same code. Oh, sorry, this is my phone's fault. I locked the rotation because I use it in the car and I don't want it to rotate. So if I reload it, this would build it now, I think, with 3 rows of images, okay? And so each one of these things here has a behavior, and it's built on top of jQuery. Well, actually, this is not jQuery. This is GWT, Google Windowing Toolkit, okay, which this was built. They're building a new version because this is okay, but it's not super responsive, I guess. But so you can build fairly sophisticated things, and so I have examples in Apache Cordoba in which you can also embed jQuery in the phone itself to build more sophisticated UIs. So you can build very nice UIs. So originally, in fact, so this is also something that you can access entirely with Chrome. This is a gardener coming and cleaning. Actually, this is my house. It's really this webcam app. You could also view these in a browser such as Chrome. So instead, this is a web app in which if you want to choose the cameras, the time, it uses dialogues, etc. So why did I bother building the app, given that the main functionality of looking at the images was done through the web? Actually, this is it's a personal use case, okay, because I worked on this. But let me tell you, why did we do it this particular way? And the reason may appear incredibly silly, but look at this. I move the finger and this moves very smoothly, okay? Because it's a web view and the phone is nice. But these keys remain where they are, okay? If I access the same thing from a browser, assume that I have a bookmark for it. Let me just type the site name. 1 second, okay? Sorry, takes a moment. Yeah. Oh God. I just want to log in. Hey, where is it? They want me to get the app, but I just want to. Good. Sign in. Okay, this is pretty bad. I need to complain to them. But okay, no, I'll complain really actually because. But now let me show you what happens here. Actually, they have to change the UI because if we try to have exactly the same UI as in the other one, what was not working is that these buttons move all the time. Okay, it's a very simple, it's a very small change, but in the app we can have these buttons here at the bottom that always give you the choice of where to go, and I can scroll, but this scan button is always there. No, it's a very small choice, but essentially there is a little bit of a millisecond lag in responsiveness difference between a native app and a web app. Okay, if you want something to really, you see, this app opens incredibly quickly, closes very quickly. This feels very smooth, but the buttons are semi-transparent and lay over the web view. This is because the buttons are native. Okay, there are many things that if you try to get the same touch and feel really via web app, it's going to be a little bit harder. Just because it's difficult to write web apps that are as optimized in the JavaScript handling as you can do the native code optimized in Java. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, why are we using a web app here? Okay, for the main image content rather than developing a native one. The reason is that these, as you can see from especially from the other one, from the other prototype, is still a prototype, right? And when you do a prototype, you want to iterate very quickly, and it becomes sometimes very difficult to iterate quickly and produce a version of your app that works on iOS, on Android, and on the web. It's much easier if you can to do the shell that will never change and maybe then make that native, but then deliver the piece that you really want to iterate on in a web view. Okay, here things like the choice of time or cameras you want to stare at. We're not going to change that very often because the concept is very simple. Choose the time, choose the cameras, and do what you want. Instead, exactly how we should show the images, whether we should give an overlay that shows what's moving, how we should magnify them. You see, here there's a magnification. There's a bird there, I guess. I cannot see well, but there must be a bird that are moving, actually, that thingy there, yeah. No, it's a squirrel, I think. Anyway, whatever it is. But you can iterate much more quickly on a web view than you can by having, you need many fewer people, essentially. You need a web developer rather than somebody doing iOS, somebody Android, and somebody web. No, it's much easier. So, so still, many things in this UI are suboptimal. I think I want you to appreciate better my squirrels. I wonder if you can see. No, not very well, eh? No, it's a bird. Yeah. And that's a squirrel, yeah. Squirrel plus birds, something like that. I think I will need to pull up the brightness more. Yeah, not very good contrast. At any rate, so I think that's, oh, curious. You see the proximity sensor? Yeah. That flashing LED is the proximity sensor. If it sees its own reflection, then you're close. Okay. So yeah, you can make web views that are quite responsive. There are some things that are difficult to do, though. For example, that app. I don't know. They're developing a new version, native Android, that is much nicer. It's all native, and it's you can swipe from one image to the next. You can do a lot of these very touch-intensive things that Android offers good framework to do. And And there is really, we are very good as humans to detect, if the motion of the finger and the motion of the image go at exactly the same speed or not. So even minor differences in lag make a large impression on the usability. Other questions or other things in general? Let me ask you a question that I've been wondering all these days, actually. You can answer me now or later or etc. I'm sort of unhappy of how I gave this class. I think, I did some things better than last year and some things really did not work well. The thing that works better is that I think that the pieces of code that I gave you, or the information that I gave you on those pieces was better, and the pieces were cut out in such a way that I do think that I gave you some of the sort of fundamental building blocks around which you can develop your own apps. The thing that does not work well, and I'm really wondering at how to solve, is this. Originally, when this class was smaller, I could follow all the projects, and it was much more interesting because I could follow the projects, give a personalized advice to the various projects, and it was a great experience. Now I'm sort of wondering, is it worth to have projects in a class that is so large where you cannot follow the projects? And so I have these three alternatives in my mind, and I really would like to open a bit of discussion because I need to know what to do for next year. So there is alternative one, which is don't do projects. Do homework, and then maybe open another class that is only for people that really want to do it, that has a project. And keep that class size small enough, probably below 40 people or below, so that I can actually follow all the projects. Now this is great, except that I'm not sure I'm able to teach this other smaller class, given that my teaching load overall. So it may or it may not exist. The possibility number two, so one possibility is no project. The other possibility is to have projects, but somehow limit the class size. But this doesn't work well, right? Because enrollment in CS is expanding, not only here in most universities, so it will probably continue to expand and so, just teaching to fewer, smaller classes is apparently not a solution. The third solution is to do what I'm doing now, which is a very suboptimal approach, but is based on this idea that I say, okay, fine. Basically, the project, since I cannot follow them all, is for your own amusement and for your own instructions. There is some people that will enjoy it immensely and will have a project to show to employers or other people afterwards. There are some people who will enjoy it less and do less. But at least I give you this possibility, even if I cannot follow you, except if you come to office hours or ask on Piazza or do something like that. So these are, the three choices that I have in my mind, and I'm a little bit at a loss. Do you have any good suggestion? What should I do next year? I really have these various, I mean, I cannot offer a class to 120 people and then follow all the projects, because typically if you follow a project seriously, you need to put hours in it.
If you expand, are you going to have like sections in PA?
I might. Now, this year, I mean, our TA was excellent, but I didn't want to ask him to review all the projects every week. The first time I gave it, actually it was a web class, but there was a weekly review session compulsory for every project. But the class was way smaller, and we had like 18 projects. And so, somehow this was doable.
You could have people turn in various built-in projects every week as the
and then other people try them, or who would give advice on those?
Yeah, have other teams test out.
I see. This I can do, by the way. If you like, I can set, give you a sort of, it's not a fake deadline of Sunday night for you to upload your APK and get advice from other people. Not graded, but you can essentially get feedback. That I can do. This is a very good suggestion. So you say expand the peer review also to the project while it's going on. But what I really miss is that there are a lot of very interesting topics in which you can go if you actually In fact, I would like to beg you to actually ask me interesting questions now from difficulties you have on your project. It's the starting point for interesting discussions. Yeah.
I have an issue where I'm trying to get Google Cloud Messaging to work, but if I don't have the server up and running, I can't really do it. But it's hard to get the server up and running unless you know what you want from Google Cloud.
Okay. So I'll answer to you, but so if a moment, let me close the discussion. If you have any suggestion on the project, you can also post on Piazza or email me. I'm looking for feedback for what to do for next year because I'm not very happy of not having provided guidance to the projects essentially. Of course, I mean you can ask me or the TA in office hours. Have you been seeing many projects in office hours? No, because not so many come to my office hours with project problems. But I think it's a pity also that these things are not more discussed in class. So please, for the next 2 lessons, come here with interesting questions about your project. Now, about Google Cloud Messaging, I wish I had a good answer. The story I have is the following, and you may not be happy of this answer, but it's the one I have. Okay. I think they were the 3rd iteration of that code base. It used to work, then it was deprecated, then it used to work something else, then it was deprecated again, and then now there is a 3rd version of Google Cloud Endpoints and cloud messaging. I had a colleague of mine work for 2 months trying to get it all to work seamlessly. Okay, the chief difficulty is this. There is actually a very nice presentation. Google did a presentation in March at a cloud event in San Francisco, and you can find all the videos on the web. And there is one video that is 1 hour long that you can watch on how to set up Google Cloud Endpoints and messaging. Okay. The chief difficulty I found myself with it is this. It assumes that you are starting from a completely blank slate, and it tells you how to create everything from scratch. Okay? If you do that, and you don't deviate an epsilon, and if you know how to include all the dependencies, then you succeed. The difficulty in which my colleague ran into is that if you have a project that is already existing, maybe in the cloud or on the mobile, this automated approach that creates all the right interfaces doesn't really work well because it creates all the wrong interfaces, assuming the wrong names. So they built something that is complex and whose automatic mode assumes that you're starting from 0. And there is no information on how to add cloud messaging or cloud endpoints to an app that is already existing. And so, I mean, I told them as much when I met them in March. But my impression when I was chatting with them is that this is not a very large Google group. It may be 2 or 3 people, and they're already doing a lot of work on it, and they simply, can't find the time to sufficiently document how to add their system to that. So so this applies to cloud endpoints, which is a more complicated protocol than messaging. Messaging should be easier, I think, but I have not done it.
It's just that in the documentation server part of it, it's like not nearly as well explained as the encrypt part of it.
I mean, if you like to work on it together, we can either now or in office hours or when you like.
Okay.
Sorry? No, we could also do it. Yeah, but I believe it. So if you want, we can meet. So I mean, this is really a part that I need to explore myself because there is so much change and difficulty related to it. Maybe now it's simpler, but cloud endpoints is still not simple. If you want to sync your information on the Android with the one in the cloud, it's still very complicated.
We're in the same group, and here's the problem I'm running into. So I checked out Google App Engine, which seemed pretty cool, but so we're trying to set up an XMPP messaging system, which is like an extensible open messaging platform.
Okay.
And Google App Engine for sandboxing purposes can't open a socket, which means it can't actually be used as an XMPP server. So,
well, I think I haven't used it, but I know that there is a socket protocol now available.
Really?
Yes, because I'm sure of it. Because if I go in, if I go into an app engine, for example, as myself, here is CodeGrader, on which I have a paying console. Oh, okay. But well, let me look at it a moment first. I mean, have you looked into the Channels API?
Channels API?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Because I think. So, okay, Channels API is not the same as. So these are search results. So Channels API is different for XMPP, but it's something that enables you to some of the same things. So App Engine channels. And so again, I haven't used it, but people I know have used it, so it must work. So create a persistent connection between your application and Google servers, allowing your application to send messages to JavaScript clients in real time without the using of polling. Is this what you need, basically, or not?
Well, the guy who's on our team who wanted to handle the encryption side of the project wanted to use this specific library for the, but it could also work. You just have to consider how it.
Okay. We can talk later more specifically, but yes. So essentially, yeah, Google App Engine is a very managed service and doesn't give you access to the sockets to the Unix sockets layer. And that's true. So essentially, in the cloud, you have various levels of managed machines, but on this level, you don't have access to that. That's true.
Okay.
Or you could also move instead to something else. I don't know whether Python anywhere gives you access to sockets. Maybe it does. Otherwise, you can use a raw virtual machine on Amazon EC2 or Google Compute Engine if you like, or use a physical server. Physical server, personally is the option I like the least, perhaps, for the reasons I told you earlier in the class. But yeah. But so I have not used these, so I haven't read the JavaScript reference for these.
Right. Well,
It looks interesting, but one of my first questions that pop into my mind is, this is great, but can you access it from something else than a JavaScript? Can you access it from Android natively, for instance, rather than using a web view with a JavaScript running into it?
also isn't secure. That would be my question.
Right. But security might be because you can just use HTTPS probably. But again, I haven't looked into it. I'm just assuming that you can use HTTPS. Any other? Yeah. So no, for the cloud messaging, I can. Would be fun to look at it together. Other questions on projects? Any particular problem you have that you would like me? Yes.
What's the name of the server you're writing again? Sorry.
To build your server code, App Engine. Yes. Any other question that we can? Okay, would you like me to give you a quick sketch of Apache Cordoba and how it works? Yeah, for a more complete sketch, I want to postpone to next time because I want to make you the latest version work, which is this one. And I have this very funny bug actually that I need to check that when I update the code, it refuses to build a new. I mean, it doesn't see the changes I'm making to the code. That's the problem. It's a very basic. It has nothing to do with the project not working or anything like that. It's simply that it doesn't. When I edit the code, it doesn't change it. So let me instead open this project that was done with a slightly older version of Cordova. So let me explain. In Cordova, you do the following. You install Apache Cordova. Cordova, by the way, not Cordoba. I get confused because Cordoba is a city in Spain. You install Apache Cordova, and the idea is this. What you write is a web portion with a certain API. And then Cordova will take care of building a client, so everything that goes around the web page, for each one of a number of target architectures. And there is a fairly wide set of target architectures. There is you can target Windows machines, Linux machines, Mac OS machines. You can target Android, BlackBerry, iOS, iPhone, Windows phones, etc. Okay, so so you install the Cordova tools and you give a command to create an Android environment. Once you do that, you have the following available. Okay, so this is essentially how it looks. It looks like a completely normal Android application, except that somewhere, in this case, this is the old version, in assets dab dab dab, there are some files, okay, and index.html is the main file. Then you can put, supporting JavaScript. So, for example, you can add the JavaScript to supporting which you load jQuery, which is a very popular JavaScript library. You can load other libraries, etc., etc. So you're essentially, it's as if you are building your web server here to describe how to bring up the screen on the phone. Okay. So what you do is this: you write this web page. Here I'm loading these various JavaScript code, okay? And then I'm saying, when the device is ready, run the on-device ready JavaScript function. So this is JavaScript function, okay? And here I'm using the geolocation function, and I'm saying navigate, so you can add to Cordova many APIs that talk to all the various, maybe quiet because it's a bit distracting there at the bottom. Yeah. You can add many plugins that enable you to talk from JavaScript to many aspects of the phone. Okay, there is one for geolocation, one for accelerometer, one for taking photos, one for making movies, one for this, one for that. There is a long list of these plugins. You can also develop your own plugins if you want. Okay, but then in JavaScript you write code like this. You say that when the device ready event is received, you should run on device ready. When device ready runs, it says navigator geolocation, get current position, and you give it the function to be executed on success and on error. This is the typical style of JavaScript coding, by the way. Whenever you do a call that is not instantaneous, you pass as arguments to the call the code to be executed when the call has either succeeded or failed. Okay, it's a bit different from Java. In Java, you would you would wait for things to happen, typically in Java. And so if things are slow, you need to do them in a different thread. JavaScript is a very different language in this respect. It is event-driven. It's driven by events, and your code is not meant to ever get stuck for a long time. You should write everything that can get stuck as a call to something in which you pass as arguments what to do when the task is over. Okay, so that's the style of coding in JavaScript. So this tries to get the current position, and you tell it what to do on success and on error. This on error function gets an error and is not so interesting. It just logs the code, the error of code. and the onSuccess function will get to the position as argument, okay? And the position is a JavaScript object. JavaScript is a very different language from Java, nothing to do with it. But it has also a notion of objects, and objects can have fields that you can access with the dot notation, no? So the location is an object. Sorry, the position passed here as an argument is an object that has many attributes, and so you say you are accessing position, cards, latitude, longitude, altitude, etc., etc. Okay, and so what we are doing is this: we are looking, much as in Android to do get view by ID. So in JavaScript you have the document, which is the root of the tree of the elements that go onto the page, right? So you have to imagine that when a web page is loaded into a browser, the browser parses it and generates a parse tree. So a tree that represents the organization of the page, no? So if you have for example, a parse tree may look like this. So the document is the root document, and then you may have, I don't know, an enumeration. This is a simplified example, but this node may have is an enumeration node that can have many li nodes. So essentially, there is a parse tree. Actually, it's pointless to talk. Okay, I can show. You take any page like this one, and if you do view developer tools, this gives you essentially a view of what the parse tree is. So there is the root of the document, and then there are all the children of the various nodes, and you can expand any children to see what are the children of that child, etc., etc. No? So you can essentially examine the parse tree of a document in this way via the browser. So Chrome lets you do it, and also Mozilla does. Okay, there is a Firebug for Mozilla. Okay, so much as you can do this, as you can do the find view by ID, in JavaScript you can say document.getElementById geolocation, and this will get any element that has an ID equal to geolocation. And here in the body, okay, there is here a paragraph with ID geolocation that says finding geolocation. So this there will be on the screen initially this paragraph that says paragraph finding geolocation will be the content of the paragraph, okay? And then once the call to get current position succeeds and calls on succeed, I will get in element, I will get that paragraph, because I get the element that has an ID of geolocation, okay? And then here I say element.innerHTML is equal to this thing here. So essentially I'm taking that paragraph in my document there. Now there is the document, and it contains various stuff, but then there is a special paragraph with an ID which is current location, no, geolocation, no? And essentially I'm telling it that this is a paragraph that has a certain HTML content, which initially is getting geolocation, and I'm telling it, please, on success, set the inner HTML of that element, the inner HTML will be the HTML content of the paragraph, please set it to be the following thing. Okay, and I'm building this string that says latitude, and then I say the latitude, longitude, and then essentially I'm building just a big string, nothing very special. So the code is very simple. This particular code that I build. Okay. First, I add an event listener that when the device is ready, calls the onDeviceReady function. The deviceReady function starts the geolocation and tells it to call on success or on error, depending on whether it succeeds or fails. On success, okay, what you do is that you go fish out, just as you do find view by ID. Here I do document get element by ID, and I go find out on the screen the place that I want to replace, okay, the place that I want to affect, and then I write in place of, I change the HTML contained in that place. So it's not very different in principle from what you do in Android. In Android, what would you do, You would have either in the on resume, this would be equivalent to putting things in on resume, to having things done on document ready, right? You could equally well do it when you click on a button. But essentially, you start some computation, and when you get the results in Android, you would do find view by ID, and then maybe that view would be a text view, and then you would call a set text method, right? That is what you would do in Android. The same thing here is done by getting the HTML element and setting its HTML content to something. So there is a certain parallelism between how things work. And now to give you a quick demo of how this works, let me run it on the phone, which is faster. Let's see if this switch works. What is it? Autofocus? Oh, okay. Yeah, my wire is too short. Stupid problem. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so if I run this code, let me run it one moment. I need this to, okay. Okay, so it happened quite fast. Maybe we should try to rerun it one moment. So let's see what happens. Look again. Finding geolocation track, and it gets replaced by the geolocation. Okay. So okay, the other thing that I tried to write, I haven't tested it, but I made a div element with ID target that says where am I? Okay, and if I wanted to do things well, I would style it with the CSS to make it look like a button. Okay, and I'll do it for next time, or we will see. But I just did it in a hurry. But there is this div with this ID that says where am I, and then I add a script that says for anything that has ID target, if you click on it, I want to do an alert that I clicked it, and then I want to redo the geolocation. So let's see whether this works. This I wrote it last year, so let's see whether this works. I have no idea. Let me click here. Yes, clicked. And then it updates the geolocation. Okay, so essentially, I could style this div where am I could style this to be a button. Okay, via CSS, and it would look much better. And but this is how you really can build essentially apps in JavaScript. I mean, I'm not sure I should do it here because you know, there is another class based on building for the web that would tell you how to build with interactive web pages with JavaScript and this type of things. But essentially, the message is this: you can build your app as if it was a web page, but you can provide all the JavaScript locally. If you look at the organization of the app, sorry, let me show you again the code. Oh, sorry, I was forgetting that you could not see the code I was telling you about. Let me know if this happens. I wish we had views, parallel views. You see, when I was clicking on the phone again, I had this target, this div with ID target, okay, and then I had a space where let's say the no idea, no, and then I did the following. When you clicked on the ID target, so I was associating to the target a click listener that said when you click on it, first show that you clicked. This I was doing it for debugging, simply to show you that I could listen to the click event. Okay, and then I would again trigger the geolocation to get with get current position. Okay, so this is what I was doing. Is this clear? Eh? Okay, so this is a way using jQuery, which is a JavaScript library for attaching listeners to an event. In fact, if I use jQuery, I could do things in a little bit more sophisticated way, just for you to show you an alternative. I can use here another onSuccess function that can be onSuccess JQ for jQuery. Okay, I can copy this function onSuccess JQ and I can write a different version in different style. Okay, I can just write it here, I guess. Okay, and I can say function onSuccess JQ. And I just want to write a simple function, okay? But I can say in jQuery, you don't need to do get element by ID, but if you want to have something that has a certain ID, for example, ID output, I can simply say do this output, okay? And then I can say HTML, which will set the HTML to a certain value. So jQuery makes this kind of web page dynamic update easier, essentially, no? And I can say, let's make it very simple, lat plus position latitude plus longe plus I think this might be all we need for this example. Okay, so a very simple onSuccess function, much shorter than the previous one, but it should still work. Let me see whether this actually works. Of course, I can always have made mistakes, so I have no idea whether. But this so far works. Yes. Okay. It replaced the I have no idea below with a new location below. So if I press where I am again, it does this, and then it will replace that string. Oops, I clicked it twice. You see, it replaces string below in the div output. Okay. So the code is fairly simple here. So what's the advantage of this? This really has a lot of advantages, and if you like, I can. I mean, we have time essentially in the last classes, so it's as you like. I can either answer questions for you on projects, or if you like, I can give you a super quick introduction to coding in JavaScript, in order so that you could develop in the future apps like these, but written in JavaScript. It's as you like. Let me know what you like. I want to give you an example of. Well, but this basically is a good example of writing in Cordova. Okay, so the principle is this: you write a web page in JavaScript in which you can access the font functionality via plugins. This one for geolocation is one of the plugins, but you have a host of them. You have we used to have only a dozen, but now there is a growing list in which you can do more and more things. Okay, so there is this fantastic list of plugins, and what you do is you write essentially JavaScript that can access all that and can also do all the other things that JavaScript normally does, like talking to servers, calling servers and sending information back and forth, and so on. So it's quite an appealing way to develop for mobile. Once upon a time, one of the limitations in Android was that the WebView client that was available was not very good. Okay, it was a code base that was different from the Chrome browser. It was slower, and it was not as efficient in many respects. Okay, in graphical accelerations, etc. Since the latest versions of Android, I forgot whether it's 4.1 or what, but essentially WebView is running Chrome, the same code base as Chrome. And so it has become quite fast, and this is really a very good alternative for building apps. So if you like, let me know, but I could, I mean, we could build a simple, reasonable app next time using these, just to see how it is.
So were your plans to cover the most recent Cordova? I've had experience with it during the hackathon, and one thing we ran into was we were trying to develop plugins just ran into snag documentation that was playing on that. I was just curious.
No, I ran into a super simple snag. I will be happy to show you afterwards. But, because I was playing with this code base and it worked. And then I moved to the newer one, thinking I would also be able to make it work. And it installed perfectly. Everything went perfectly. But I have this very strange bug that I can demo to it after class, I guess, because we are a bit out of time, but in which essentially, if I edit my index.html and I tell it to run the application, for some reason it does not even detect that the index.html is updated, and it refuses to build a new app altogether. So there is something basically wrong, I think, simply in the setup here that I have for Eclipse, because I was trying desperately to type new code, and it was not even. So it's very basic. It's probably something very silly in the way in which I imported the app in the Netscape, but we will see afterwards. It's nothing conceptual, really. So this is an incredibly appealing way of doing things. The difficult question is, why would you ever build in Android when this is available? And I don't know it. I don't know which method is better in general. Android gives you much more control of a lot of things regarding animation, storage on the phone. You have all these, you have many things that are very simple, these settings, so that you can store this information permanently on the phone. Also, Java is a beautiful language in which to work. I mean, maybe you don't think so because you're using it for the project and you're going crazy, okay? But in Java, you go crazy, but when it finally compiles, usually, you only have some errors left. No? I find the Java code to be easy to maintain. You are sometimes able to get huge things, huge pieces of code that already work, and you sort of, wrap them in a different class and put them somewhere else. And once you get rid of all the type errors, chances are it might even work. JavaScript is a much, much harder language to debug and maintain. JavaScript is full of crazy quirks as a language. And even if you try to use it in a sane way, which is what I do because I'm not, I don't know all the quirks, it's one of these languages in which you never know that the code works until you actually execute it. So that you have to build really good test suites in order to be able to have any confidence that your code reorganization actually works. So there is a real difference there. Also, another difference is that if you deploy an application to the market and it crashes, when it crashes, you get a full stack trace of why it crashed for the user. And that is incredibly helpful in identifying rare problems, right? Because you say, oh, there was a null pointer exception there. God, I really didn't think I could ever get a null pointer there. How strange. I didn't think, and you realize why, and it's one of these super strange cases, right? And you can fix it. If you develop in these, you will still get I mean, when JavaScript fails, it fails silently. The default behavior is that just nothing gets done, you know, but there is no error at all. And so if you deploy this to the market, you're simply not able to leverage the debugging that all your users will give you by using your app, right? It's much harder to shoot. And the problem is that a lot of users suffer in silence until they uninstall your app. It's not really that they will email you back, look, you know, I pressed on that obvious button there and nothing happens. No, they will simply, you know, they install the app at some point. And so you will never know the problem they are running into unless you actually test for it. So I think this is part of the equation. Okay. See you next time. Let me know on Piazza whether you would like me to build an app in this with a brief longer introduction on how it works, or whether you have questions on the project that you would like me to answer.